What is up, YouTube? Back again with another video. We're finally back to doing the My Book series. I know I haven't done one for a few weeks. I think it was like 2 weeks ago, the last one I did. I just have some big video ideas I'm planning on working on it now, as well as I've been grinding COD, so I've been kind of focused on that. Yeah, man. So we're just gonna jump straight into it. If you haven't watched last video, go watch it so you guys know where we're at, so we can just jump right into this one. So we're starting this one off with chapter 11, the final battles of the 2080s. And just short, quick thing before we actually get into it that I do want to say, just in case I know I got some new people to the channel. The My Book series is basically just a series of videos that I've been doing, going over every chapter that I have currently made in my book called the War for the World Survival. I've been writing it for about 2 years. Well, I should say 1.5 years, because 1 year, the first year, was me just thinking about the story and kind of doing my own like story in my brain. And then obviously the second year, which would be the beginning of 2023, is when I really started to write the book. And yeah, so that's pretty much what it's about. And if you're interested in the book, there's a free link on my Discord that you guys can go and read the early copy that is currently out right now. And that's about 70% finished compared to the copy I'm working on right now. So it gives you guys kind of idea of how to keep up with me while I'm doing these videos. With that being said, let's get into it. So the early 2080s were going to be very, very rough for the EDF, right? The EDF were struggling horrifically. There was a high food shortage, and the death percent rate was through the roof, with nearly 50% casualty rates per battle. Some casualty rates were higher than others. Specifically, the smaller battles were extremely high, but they were struggling. They were barely holding things together. The second coming of the xL were really hitting hard to the Earth forces. And so the EDF need a win, right? They need something to hold them over, right? To hold the population over. And that's going to be the Battle of Mexico City. Mexico City will be a huge, crucial battle in the coming scene, right? So there's an idea to build walls to force the xL through certain tunnels of combat. So for example, right, they would form multiple layers of walls through the country of Mexico, and kind of funnel these xL forces through that funnel, making it a lot easier to do ambushes and to do bombing runs and airstrikes and stuff of that form. And obviously this does not work, obviously, because when has building giant walls ever deterred a force that can literally just fly above them, right? And so in the middle of 2080, the Battle of Mexico City takes place, where around 50,000 Marines were ordered to stand their ground at all costs and buy the EDF enough time to just get prepared. Really, that's really what it came down to. After around 72 days, they finally broke. So for 72 days, 50,000 U.S. Marines were able to hold their ground in a city that is, and normally in just in real life, right, is a rough city. Mexico City has a lot of crime, right? But you know, we're not thinking about really in crime rates. We're talking about here in visually. It's a very rough city. It's got a lot of slums. It's got a lot of high rises, and it's kind of got that mixture, making it very, very rough for any forces to hold it for very long, because you're kind of trapped in it once you're in there. So these 50,000 Marines held for 72 days before they finally retreated after being broken. And the only reason they retreated and broke was because they ran out of ammo, and pretty much food, water supplies ran low. Rivers near Mexico City became so filled with blood from the wounded being dropped by the edge of the river that it became undrinkable. And unfortunately for the Americans on the ground, the xIL had just landed massive warships off the coast of Brazil. And this would be the main force that would cause serious pain throughout this next couple of chapters. The casualty rates from Battle of Mexico City were rough, to put it lightly. So out of the 50,000 U.S. Marines that initially went to Mexico City to help defend it, 43,000 were killed. So you're looking at about 7,000, 8,000 were alive. And out of those 7,000 to 8,000 that did make it out, around 60% of those were injured. Another 20% of those 60% that were injured were seen to have some serious injuries, that being limbs blown off, like high losses of blood. And so it was just hell for the Marines. And then on June 1st of 2089, so a couple years have gone by this point, relatively speaking. So remember, this first book is designed to jump around a lot and kind of give you a brief understanding. And then I plan to do deeper dives into each individual story as I progress this universe, right? June 1st of 2089, the xIL began moving through Mexico. So this is around the time that Brazilian force that I was talking about a few minutes ago begins to really migrate upwards, right? And so the EDF obviously seeing this, knowing that Mexico is on the brink of complete failure. Mexico's at this point is relying on its rebel forces, because most EDF and U.S. forces have at this point withdrawn from the area, as the amount of casualties were not sufficient enough to reward another invasion. So on a few days after June the 1st, the 32nd Airborne were ordered to hold the Mexican-American border gate. So remember these walls that were built, right? We're talking 40, 60 feet high walls, and there's one singular massive gate smack dab center in Texas. Now the theory was put these massive walls up that stops any ground forces from being able to infiltrate without being spotted. But there was still needed to be a way for people from Mexico and America to transport back and forth. And so they had a massive, 3-story tall, gate in the center. And what this allowed for them to do is transport really big objects, a lot of people, a lot of resources at one time. So the 32nd Airborne, around 5,000 men, were ordered to defend it at all cost. Now, there was no realization of an attack, so EDF were pretty confident that they would have more infantry at the Mexican-American border gate before the xIL would attack. So originally, they were planning to have another 50 to 60,000 infantry, Marines, Rangers, and Airborne all in that location. And then it happened. The xIL flanked to the west, hitting Seattle pretty hard, nearly wiping out the population of Seattle within a few hours of their initial engagement. And it is unclear how the xIL managed to get beyond the gate and hit the west. Many believe they found a loophole in the gate, and others believe they just simply flew over it. But no one truly knows. Obviously, this is a problem for the EDF, and the EDF tells the 3rd Airborne, the 32nd Airborne, that, hey, they're attacking us over here, so you're probably fine. They were not. And this is about 5 days after the 32nd Airborne were at the gate, so they had been there for a couple days prior. And with Seattle breaking within a few hours of its battle, it put a major damper on the EDF, right? Unfortunately, for the 32nd, less than 48 hours after Seattle's invasion, they were also attacked, but by the main force. Yes. 157,000 xIL infantry launched a full-scale assault on the Mexican-American gate. The 32nd were not prepared for this large scale. I mean, this is a 300 to 1 percentage ratio. I mean, they were not nearly prepared. And when the initial assault began, they knocked out the radio comms. And what this basically means is the 32nd were on their own. There was no one else. No one could hear them. And for all they knew, no one could see them. And that's a big problem. With the radios dead, the 32nd realized very quickly that they're in an oh fuck me moment. And they're about to stare down hell itself. And around 4:09 p.m., the first shots were fired, knocking out the main communications. Okay. By the 23rd of June, they had really began to run low on resources. And my dates are a little messed up in my paragraph. I'm reading the paragraph now, and I just realized how fucked up my dates are. So those will probably be changed. So if you're wondering why I said 23 days, that is because I'm an idiot and I don't know how to look at my own shit, apparently. But we're gonna pull up a thing real quick. This is a comment from an EDF soldier on the ground. I'm gonna pull this up for the video if I can find it in this chapter. All right, here we go. An EDF soldier wrote in a letter that was found on his body after the battle. I'm going to say this here because I want to get this in here before I conclude the battle itself. He wrote to I think it was his father. Says, "We shall stay and die because it's our duty, but these things aren't normal. They come from the darkness. We stay and die one at a time, and they die in the 12s, but they keep coming. God, I hope there is still someone out there, because we sure do need help. 32nd all the way." The carnage that the 32nd would face during this battle would be some of the most gruesome of the 2080s. Some soldiers wrote that it was, they would use their comrades' bodies as walls because the explosions were causing too many holes in the line. They would hold, surprisingly, for quite a while, for almost 2 weeks almost. And by this point, they had no idea the outside world was doing anything, really. To them, they were by themselves, no one was coming to help them, no one knew the situation, and that they were fighting for the very fucking safety of their lives, right? But, unknowns to them, the EDF had actually been making some serious progress back in Seattle. They were pushing the xIL back because, remember, the xIL didn't hit in Seattle with its full force. That was a diversion tactic to break that gate in Mexico. And because of this, the EDF were able to push back a little bit harder in Seattle. Now, what this means was that the EDF knew about the 32nd situation, but the EDF didn't have the resources to send a whole division of infantry to go support because they knew the situation down there was grim. And it was only a matter of time before the EDF could come, but they were just praying that the 32nd could hold on a little longer. Now, there's something in this chapter that I think some people might find annoying if they're reading this story so far. But I wanted to include it because this will be something that will be talked about farther down this book's storyline. But the 32nd would be saved by a force unknown. They wouldn't show themselves. They would be they would shoot from orbit. You wouldn't be able to see their ship. They would just be explosions from the sky. But these would become crucial for the 32nd. And the stories the 32nd would have throughout the next few years would spark an interest in the xIl's history. Because remember, at this point, we didn't know much about them. We just knew they were hostile towards us. But now we had some form of evidence to suggest there was a foreign entity that was at war with the xIl as well. And somehow they knew about our fight. But unfortunately, for half of the unit of men that went in, 2,500 men did not make it back. And out of the rest of the 2,500 men, around 1,500 of those were wounded or injured. They did manage, though, to kill over 20,000 xIl, which was astonishing. Killing that many xIl, such a small number of men. On 2:30 p.m. on June 30th, with no food, no water, no ammo, every man pretty much wounded at this point, they were saved by, again, the unknown entity. And that's where this chapter kind of ends. This is a smaller chapter. Something I'm going to work on is increasing these chapters, obviously, because I do want to go in depth with some of these battles. Some of these battles I really talk briefly about, and I kind of want to go in more in depth with them. But what I think is important about this story, about the 32nd, is that idea of not giving up through immeasurable circumstances. We've seen this in history with other, stories of other divisions and other units and other wars, and I think it always astonishes me the idea of the human psyche is able to power through something as hard and as brutal as an unwinnable battle. And then most certainly, had there been no intervention from this unknown entity, the 32nd Airborne, the 1st Division of the 32nd Airborne, would have been wiped out. 100%. The numbers of xIl pushing the border were astonishing. There was no way they could have held any longer. Their ammo, food was all out. Many of the men thought they were going to have to go hand to hand, so knives and weapons that were turned into melee weapons. And unfortunately, that is just the hard truth of this war, right? This war is just a death war. That's all this is. But that's kind of the point of the story. The story is not meant to show that we're the best of the best, and not meant to show that we're weak. It's just meant to show that the human life is irrelevant, to say, put it that way. And that at any moment a foreign object or a foreign entity can wipe us out with no sympathy whatsoever. And I think as we go through these chapters and you start to see bigger battles with higher casualties, I think it's going to change your perspective of just everything, right? Because we're so used to safeties, and our safety of our everyday life. We might fear criminals, but the percentage of criminals participating in activities that influence us as everyday people is so small in retrospect. But these wars, these battles that are happening during this war are affecting everyone, from the workers in the cities to the countrymen that are doing the fighting on the front lines, and to the farmers in the homeland. It's affecting every individual in some form. There's a really cool scene that I describe in the Battle of England that will be coming here. It's one of the chapters I'm currently in the works of working on. And I think one of the most interesting things, and I'm going to give a little bit of sneak peek here, just because this video was kind of, fast. I want to kind of go into it a little bit more. I kind of described it as a thunder that you could see during the day, during the night, and a thunder that you felt everywhere. The Battle of England would be some of the most explosive battles known to man, This would be where we would drop 500-pound bombs repeatedly in the same places. And the people in Ireland, the survivors of the initial wave that struck over 100 and something years before them, wrote in their diaries. These are civilians, right? These weren't military personnel. These were people who were simply surviving, right? Ireland really wasn't a target for the exil. It wasn't a concern, so they really didn't attack it that often. And they wrote, the lights were bright as the sun became distant and the bombs overwhelmed the sun. And I think it's an idea of a war, and I think one of the biggest inspirations for it was actually Sisu, I think is how you pronounce it. It's a movie about a gold digger in I think it's Norway, who just goes absolutely crazy and kills a bunch of Nazis. And one of the things they show in the movie is Sisu looking over the horizon at a Norwegian city being bombed by from the Blitzkrieg. And this idea that you could see bombs from hundreds of miles away in the distance, and those explosions, those lights, those flashes were brighter than the sun sometimes. And I think that brings home that idea that war is coming. It is a moving machine. It is a mechanism that is ever evolving and ever moving and ever changing. And I think that's really, really, really important for this story as a whole, because this story is not just about a war. It's about a way of life. It's about the human mind and how it changes and evolves and moves and creates new things and to fix its own problems and does its own thing to survive. This isn't a post-apocalyptic world. This is a world that is still flourishing with beauty and love and happiness, but is also so affected by the carnage that is war. A world where we trust governments. How ironic is that, right? A world where we trust the government and we rely on their news to be accurate and fulfill our needs. And I think that maybe, just maybe, some people listening to this book, reading this book, will have a better appreciation for not only our troops who go beyond the call of duty, but also to remember that you, an individual, can make a difference in a war, even if it's minuscule. Making that bullet, test driving the tank, reading enough to design a new gun, delivering product from one place to another, helping a lost child because there's no one there to help them, has a huge aspect on the greater life of this war. And you will definitely see that as we go through, and I'm really going to be kicking that home, that idea of not just a military or not just a civilization, not just like a military or a community, but a civilization changing effect. And that this war isn't just about battles, it's about surviving and trying to flourish in this craziness that is the war for the world's survival. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.